All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Underground Social Media Utopia. First off, I want to thank everyone for being here. I know you guys have the option of going to not only 100 different great panels and presentations, but also a ton of very enticing rooftop bars. So really appreciate you all being here and taking the time. I will introduce our wonderful panelists here in a minute, but first I just want to kind of set the stage. So my name is Skyler Hubler. I'm a senior cultural strategist at Backslash. Shout out to the team, which is the cultural intelligence unit of international ad agency TBWA worldwide. So in my role, I'm typically sitting behind a screen, keeping up with all the latest happenings in global culture, and then translating what those cultural shifts will mean for businesses. But today I am very excited, as I'm sure all of us are, to get out from behind a screen to talk to you all about a topic that we have a very personal connection to, which is social media. I'm sure you all use it. Chances are you'll check it at least once during the course of this talk, and you may even find yourself having a kind of love-hate relationship with it. And if so, you are definitely not alone. On an individual level, we're seeing that many of us are beginning to resent the amount of time that we spend scrolling. And Backslash even conducted a global survey and found that 50% of people are making a conscious effort to reduce their screen time. At the same time, just last month, we saw Facebook's daily active users drop for the first time in its 18-year history, which is insane. And on a larger level, we're seeing governments really crack down on big tech companies like never before. And today, instead of going down that dystopian rabbit hole, we're gonna instead have a solutions-oriented conversation about how to build a more positive, private, equitable, and human kind of social media. And here with me today, I'm very excited to be joined by three brilliant people who are doing just that. So if you guys could, we'll go down the line, have you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and the kind of work you're doing now.
Terrific. I'll go first. My name is Leslie Mullins. I am CEO and co-founder of Plant Life. Plant Life was created in 2000. The idea came about in 2020, and we really kind of started to develop this in 2021. I'm joined by our co-founder, Lana Pappas. She's here in the audience. I am by default a brand marketing and consumer experience design is my background, working for brands like Nike and Apple. And so I kind of collaborated with a group of ex-Nike and Apple folks to create Plant Life with plant experts and plant enthusiasts as a way to create a space for both people and plants to thrive for many of the reasons that Skyler spoke of. And we'll kind of talk more about that, what motivated us to kind of go down this path and why we're passionate about it.
My name is Joe Toscano, co-founder of Bickham, where we're helping companies make more auditable data practices and understand a more impactful way forward through data. I got into the work as a consultant for Google. I did that about 5 years ago now. I left because I just felt that the industry was not headed in the direction that I thought it should be. I thought there were better ways of doing it, not only more ethical ways, but also just better business practices. And so I've left. I've since written a book called Automating Humanity to help educate people about those problems and how we can move forward. I was featured in The Social Dilemma, if you've seen that on Netflix, and have just generally been all around the globe talking about these issues and helping people understand how we can both do better ethically and financially. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Hello, my name is Barbara Bickham, and I am the interim CTO at Lips. Lips is a social network for kind of disenfranchised and deplatformed people. This is one of the many things that I do. I'm the award-winning CTO. I talk on blockchain and AI all over the world as well. I'm raising a fund as well. That's all exciting. I have 35 plus years of experience in tech and entrepreneurship. I've raised money for multiple companies. What else have I done? I'm excited to be here representing Lips. Lips is a very special social network. It's kind of a place for people that cannot be on social media anymore. And what happens to you when you're no longer on social media? Where do you kind of go? So that's a place where Lips is, and I'm proud to sit here and represent them today.
Awesome, thank you. Maybe too, if you could talk a little bit about why the people are being deplatformed who are going to Lips, just for context too, to give us an idea.
So Lips is a place where LGBTQ people go, or just disenfranchised people go. And a lot of these people have been deplatformed for several reasons, some harassment, some a lot of hate speech has gone on all these social media platforms, so we're a place for those people. If you type in certain hashtags, you may get deplatformed from Facebook or Instagram. We're a place for those people as well. So we're kind of a place where people that can't use social media anymore can use social media.
Love it, thanks. All right, so I know I said this would be an optimistic conversation, and I am going to stick to that promise, but I do think it's important that we first get a kind of foundational understanding of what's wrong with the current social media model. So, Joe, I'm going to turn this one over to you. You know, in the realm of social media, we often hear about a wide range of problems, from misinformation to polarization to AI bias to mental health concerns. But you've kind of chosen data privacy as your main focus. Can you talk to us a little bit about why data and what it has to do with the larger social media model?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I do believe that privacy and data and the way that the internet operates, the fundamental business model of the internet, is the core problem behind majority, if not all, the problems that we're seeing today. If you don't know a lot about the core model that we've spoken about a lot in the social dilemma, the idea of the attention economy, the core model there is that you're taking attention, you're getting people to draw in, to click, to engage, to like, to share, whatever it may be. That interaction is turning into data, which then companies are using for multifold value. They're using it for research to improve their products. They're using it for marketing reports that they're selling access to. They're using it to target advertisements. They're using it to train their AI systems. They're using it for X, Y, and Z, hundreds of other things that you may or may not even know about. And you have no payback for that. At this point in history, we have a data model with the internet to where we actually don't know the true value of data, and it's allowing companies to manipulate the market in ways that even us in the crowd who may be very technical and knowledgeable don't fully understand, because it's a black market at this point. There was a book that was written just a couple years ago about, it's called The Subprime Attention Economy. And it's actually talking about how it's so opaque, we can't see into it at all, to where these companies have just inflated their values over time. Stock prices through the roof, prices of ads way higher than they should be in value. And what's happening now is that these companies are behemoths, but they're very empty on the inside. Now, what that translates to in terms of misinformation, disinformation, stuff like that, why I think that is the root core, is because the bigger reason a lot of people are making disinformation or misinformation around the world, yes, there are people who are just naturally evil and want to see the world burn, right? I think we can all agree to that. But I think that there's not a large portion of the world who is that. It's in the business model. If I have a business model that's built around fake or misinformation that is getting a lot of clicks, but I'm earning a lot of money off of it, at this point in history, there's nothing illegal about that action, right? People claim, for example, the 2016 election, there was a lot of inflammation saying that Trump got elected because disinformation campaigns from Russia or whatever it may be. If you look at the actual numbers of what was spent from Russians, it's very small. It was somewhere around $150,000, $200,000, I believe they actually tracked down. Facebook made $40 billion off advertisements that year, right? The business model is people coming in, making things that are clickbait. That's the entire model here, right? If the internet were a highway at which the things that we were looking at, as we are now, paid money, then every time that we turned our head and looked at an accident on the side of the highway, we get paid for that. And that's where we're at as the state of the internet. It's a traffic accident. So I think the core root of it is that we need to figure out how to improve the business model of it. Part of that includes getting people paid for their data. Part of that includes just creating new platforms that people can go and make their information curated to the audience that they actually want to engage with, rather than trying to fight against the scale machine of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it may be. So that's why I got into privacy actually in data, is because I think at the root of it, we have to figure out the value of data. And through there, we can then understand the root system of the internet and make a better garden.
Yeah, thanks. And I think to all those points, people are starting to become more aware of that and aware of how they're being manipulated, thanks to documentaries like The Social Dilemma and whistleblowers like Frances Haugen. And it is creating this kind of distrust between users and platforms. And I think we even see that reflected in the language we use when we talk about the shift from mainstream platforms to these smaller, more intimate, closed community platforms, right? We often hear about like antisocial social media or small social or post-social or digital campfires. So I think that is clearly the direction where things are moving. And Leslie and Barbara, I'm curious to hear from you too, as people who are currently building these so-called digital campfires. Why are we seeing users, and especially young users, flee the mainstream platforms? Like, what is it that they're no longer getting there from your research? And Leslie, we can start with you on that one.
Well, and thanks for Joe setting it up, like building a better garden. I think that's like as simple as what we were kind of setting out to do, because it started off with a inspiration around, we're sitting around thinking like, social media doesn't need to be this toxic. And at the same point, we knew that, we had this theory that this idea of biophilia is a real thing. This notion that we as humans are inherently, are drawn to this connection with nature. And now in this digital age, there was, the more that time we spend with our devices, the less time we're outside, that is harmful. And so the more research we did, we actually found out how true that was. And to the extent that the consumers that we, interviewed and we spoke to were talking about how they are getting off Facebook because it is so toxic, or they are, leaving social media because they find that it is addicting, and that they, from a wellness perspective, there's like, I saw some statistics that, 16% of youth consider themselves like to have gone through some type of anxiety because of social media. So there's that component. We also spoke to a lot of plant influencers, and these are individuals that we're interested personally in trying to share their stories, because we feel like social media, or just even digital, that there's this great divide, and that there is an opportunity from a social perspective to elevate voices and to elevate stories that aren't necessarily getting shared today. So how do we create a place that allows us to do that? And we're just starting on this journey. But that's kind of, one of the things that we started listening to plant influencers, individuals who are creators and making content, is that they don't, particularly BIPOC creators, BIPOC plant influencers, don't feel like the algorithm in Facebook or Instagram are treating their content equally. And we're seeing this kind of in terms of feedback. That's one thing. And then you also think about it from a business perspective, from a marketplace perspective, is that then has the direct impact on plant influences or businesses growing. And so we see Plant Life as an opportunity, first and foremost, to just shine a spotlight on amazing people living their best plant life. And so by doing that, by just focusing on positiveness and, helping green up people's lives, that will just hopefully create a space where those stories percolate, the influencers percolate, and the businesses percolate, so that we can create an economical equality that isn't necessarily realized in social media today.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying too, it's like the big platforms have created something that's good for everyone, but great for no one specifically. And that's kind of what you're feeling.
Yeah. What's interesting, there's this gentleman, Chris Riley. He used to be a strategist at Apple. He's gone off. He has his own company, and he wrote a book called The End of the Mass Age, and it's the perfect size. Your book is amazing, but this is like the best for person. but it's just like, it's this small little read, but it's powerful in the sense that his whole premise is that the mass age has ended, meaning mass media, the 1% influencing the 9%, influencing the 9%. That mass media was, and I know your media was, working with a few big mass companies, and that was really pushing down a lot of, culture and what we thought, and, kind of influenced what was happening through technology. new companies and new ideas percolate up, not just in these kind of key cities, but in the emerging cities. And so you've seen this displacement of power through technology, because technology allows us as humans to be even more creative. It's actually a good thing, right? So how do we leverage this to shift and flip the power so that it's not just the 1% influencing the 9% influencing the 90, but flip it so that the 90 is influencing, up. And if you guys caught Frances's talk today, I mean, one of the statistics she put up was like something like in Facebook. And again, this is not a Facebook bash, but it's like, let's just
an easy softball.
Well, it's the facts, right? So like she put up a stat, like 10% of the content is what 80% of the people see, right? So that same kind of trickle down notion is out there, but we know that there's better stories and individuals and their journey that could be highlighted in a different way.
Yeah,
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think also in a similar vein, sorry, I'm just training.
No, go.
If you think about the way that information spreads, right, over time, we used to live in our own little villages, long time ago, right? Like individual villages. You based your life based on who was around you, what you could see, what you could interact with. Over time, we grow into larger communities, cities, empires, etc. We had to make media in order to exchange a message and to govern the people over time. Right? Eventually, we had newspapers. Eventually, we had television, things like that would allow us to reach farther, more people, and quicker messages. I think we've reached a point, like she was just saying, where it's so large that it's actually not super valued to any one set of people, and you're starting to see people who want something that's more built for them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I learned today in Frances's conversation was the fact that Facebook is the internet in many of these emerging countries.
Yeah,
and
that's all they have.
And the reach of over 1 billion people is a powerful tool. And so if you look at, again, the shifts that technology has enabled that power structure to change from a mass media, even if you think of like mass retailers, they were, big houses of brands. Well, now those brands have that power shifted away to the brands who have gone direct to consumer, and the direct to consumer growth from an e-commerce perspective is growing and growing, and then even digital native brands is growing and growing. And so those big box retailers of their power they've kind of evaporated, right? So it's a really interesting time in that you wonder, and I hope to be, and Lana and I hope, and Plant Life hopes to be part of this reshift of the power to help percolate these stories, these businesses, these individuals who are doing really great things, give them a spotlight and see what happens to them. How do they grow their businesses? How do we create, this, like I said, this equitable economic opportunity through digital and technology and social media in a way that has not been realized to date?
So Skyler, I'll pile on to the end of this conversation, but why are kind of young people coming off of Facebook? Because they look at them now as the establishment people, right? Before, when social media was new, it was kind of a novelty, and the youth kind of were like, yeah, this is cool. And then when they became uncool to younger people, people started coming off of it. So a lot of younger people looking at Facebook or Google or a lot of these companies as the establishment companies, they're like, well, we don't like the establishment. They're kind of like naturally anti-establishment people. So that's good. Also, their values are not aligned with a lot of values. If you think about sustainability and other things that people care about, the values of Facebook and some of these other companies don't align. So they come off of the social media for that purpose as well.
Yeah, Sarah Wilson, who was a former Facebook executive, wrote I don't know if you guys have seen her article in Harvard Business Journal, but she wrote that Facebook actually has been growing, right? But if you peel back at where that growth is coming from, it's not coming from youth. To your point, youth is going and looking at more passion-based, like a Discord for gaming or Glossier for beauty. Whatever the issues with Glossier is, like they're still $160 million annual business. And so, but they serve the consumer in a different way, and that they align more with their political or cultural needs.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go.
If you think about TikTok and these kind of video-based apps, I think the youth are more inclined to do that versus the text-based or kind of some of the older types of social media as well. So that's why they're trying to adopt and have, Instagram stories or these other kind of video-based engagements, because the youth is naturally more video-based.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think to that point too, we're going to see kind of the unbundling of platforms where maybe we're going to TikTok for external creator content where we're entertained, and then separately we have our smaller, more niche digital communities where we're actively engaging and having conversations, and that will then translate into real life as well, which is really exciting. But
I was going to just one more thing on that, because what you brought up is some of the plant influences that we spoke of is to your point is like TikTok serves this piece of their business, right?
Right.
But they're looking for what now that I've got this and I've got 200,000 followers or 300,000 followers. What now? How do I expand that? And who do I so they've kind of been coming to us going like, okay, now what can we do above and beyond that to grow their business or expand their brand essentially.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about inclusivity too. I know it's been mentioned by all of us now, and in the case of Lips, it's a little bit different in that people who are deplatformed due to either their content being removed due to censorship or flagged as sexual content, whatever it may be, they literally have nowhere else to go. But I want to talk a little bit more about inclusivity as it pertains to Lips. And what I love about Lips is that for you guys, inclusivity isn't just a mantra. It's something that you've actually built into the entire UX and design of the platform. So I'm wondering if you could talk us through some specifics of how Lips enables inclusivity, as well as the role that users play in that.
So we are very community driven. We have 26,000 users, all organic. We haven't run one ad. I think this is kind of the first public unveiling of Lips and any kind of speaking or social setting, at this level. And that's a great accomplishment. We listen to our users very carefully as to what they need and want. Many of our users, either from some of them are LGBTQ, some of them are BIPOC, some of them are just women. They've been completely deplatformed from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. So if you think about that, there's kind of two things that happen. One, they get very depressed, because a lot of times that was their whole monetization. So one of our influencers on Lips had 750,000 Instagram users, and that's how she was making her money. And because of the nature of her content, it was a little sexually based. It wasn't very sexually based, but Instagram didn't like it anymore, and so she had to come off the platform. And so for her, it was very upsetting, depressing. A lot of grief happened during that process, because it takes a long time to build all those people up, and now they're all gone, and you can't take them with you. When you get deplatformed, you no longer have access to any of that information, and the platform keeps all that information. So we don't know what happens to that information on Instagram. And so the lady went through a grief period, and she's one of our Lips influencers, and she's found a place where she can share and have the ability to create her content, and it is seen. The other half of being seen or not seen, is seen in the Lips platform, is that, to your point, only 10% of your content is seen, because you can be throttled by these algorithms. You can be, harassed, and then people don't like you, and so your posts are kind of, even your posts are throttled. There's a lot happening on the back end that precludes people from seeing your content, even though there's really nothing wrong with it. The other half of it is, how is this content being tagged or classified? So it can be misclassified, and if your content is misclassified, then you can become deplatformed, and you really have no recourse. When you contact Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, because Facebook is Instagram, they're the same, or even YouTube, if it happened to you there, it's very hard to get any kind of responses. So for us, our community controls how people interact, and we're kind of self-governing that way. And so we're creating an oversight board, but the oversight board is created from the community. Community nominates people, and the community actually votes these people in. The other thing that we have that's kind of unique is our platform is blockchain based. So we have full transparency as to what is posted, who posted what when, and who really owns that content. So we appreciate that because, I mean, what transparency do you really have on Facebook? You don't really know. So if you wanted to take some actions, it's very difficult to understand who has done what in those other ecosystems, Facebook or Twitter or some of these other things.
Yeah, and I think that human data labeling aspect is really interesting. And I'm curious, Joe, from your perspective, is that something that could be scaled up and potentially be a solution to the larger issues on the bigger platforms? And if so, what might that look like?
Yeah, I think right now the way that they do moderation, right, the majority of it they want to pass on to the machines. Right, we saw Zuckerberg in front of Congress a few years ago mentioned that in order to resolve this, they were going to hire 20,000 more people. And to Congress, that sounds like a lot, right? How many of us in the room have hired 20,000 people? Raise your hand, right? Like you're all like, wow, that's a small town, right? Zuckerberg can just do it with the wave of his hand, and it sounds very impressive. But if you think about the scale of it, right? I actually wrote about this in my book. New York City had, at the time, it was like, I think 9 million people in the city. They had about 15,000 firefighters or emergency responders in the city. And if you've been to New York City, you know how much those people struggle to get to each emergency appropriately because of space and time, right? We're physical beings. We can only be somewhere one place at a time, right? And the travel to get there, all those things. You're talking about 15,000 people struggling to serve 9 million. Zuckerberg stopped and said, we're hiring 20,000 people to serve 2 billion people, right? That's only a fraction of an increase. It's a 30% increase in the number of humans working, but 230x amount of the people to be served. So I think there's definitely room for the machines to come in, right? DARPA actually did a study called Chess a few years ago, Computers and Humans Exploring Software Security, where they talked about how computers are great at being the fishnet. They're great at going out and grabbing the things, but you still need humans. This is DARPA. This is our leading military defense. DARPA saying you still need humans to do the last detail part of it, right? I think an interesting concept, in some places you're seeing similar concept pops up, but not quite entirely. You could have a decentralized organization that does not work for Facebook or Twitter or any one organization, that when there is misinformation that pops up, this organization, which could be millions of people, it could be its own platform in and of itself, helps moderate the content. Just like a reCAPTCHA. I'm sure everyone knows reCAPTCHA, may not necessarily know it, but it's that thing at the bottom of the screen that always asks you, are you a human or not? You got to identify images or whatever. Well, all that is, first of all, that's a tool owned by Google. And all that is them saying, here's the thing that our systems were not capable of recognizing. Can you tell us what it is? And over the course of 100 million people saying this is an O or that's a 0, they can statistically decide, well, that's an O because 90% of people said it's an O, right? We could start to do that and make a more democratic content moderation platform. I think an easy start would be in more objective, like black and white information, things that, let's say medical information, not totally black and white, but there are definitely more, there's more empirical research that can prove X is true about a disease or X is not true about a disease, things like that. And you could have doctors who, let's say they're on the verge of retirement, they're in their late 60s, early 70s, they probably shouldn't be getting in there with the details anymore. Like, they're great leaders. They have a lot of knowledge of the field. They know they have a depth of information in their head that's very valuable, but maybe like physically they shouldn't be using the detailed tools anymore. Well, they could help moderate that. They could get paid to help moderate that and work a remote job that pays them and gives them the ability to still practice, in a sense, to still participate in the field and do good for our world by moderating health information on the internet. It's a simple way that I think I haven't really seen a platform come out and do that. I don't know if either of you have seen anything like that, but I proposed that a few years ago in my book, and I think that that's something we could start to discuss as well, is like an independent organization that you get a diverse population to sit and moderate content. You actually democratize it rather than allowing Facebook to say, hey, we're hiring these 20,000 people. It's our call. Good luck. If you have problems, try to reach out to us. Try. We're not going to, but try.
So we're doing a mix of Libs. We're doing some AI moderation because we can't afford to hire 20,000 people yet. So we're using AI for some of the moderation, and we're using people for all the oversight. So it's kind of a hybrid of what you're saying, which makes sense in my mind. Even Facebook, for those, should have some moderation board. And the other thing about creating a more democratized system that way is if you did do kind of a decentralized autonomous organization, you could kind of see and have the transparency around who is really moderating, curating, who's the most vocal, who's the least vocal. You can kind of have more insight and transparency around who these people are. Right now, all these things are getting pulled off the internet, and we just, probably AI is making this decision, but I'll just say, who's really making this decision? Probably AI, though.
I think that's also why we're seeing their stock prices start to drip so bad, right? Like, part of it, obviously, we had the hit last quarter that Facebook got recently, which was, oh, privacy is going to take away $10 billion in revenue. No, that's a bad business model. You're built on the fact that you can abuse people, and then now that you can't abuse people, you're going to lose $10 billion. Okay, well, there's a problem in itself. But then, yeah, I mean, content moderation, I think, is the next layer. Once we start to have people wising up and saying, like, all of your people on your platform, we can't operate on here. They're literally taking my livelihood from me in the matter of right? It's gone. Like, we got to have some solution to this. And I think part of that also we've talked about getting people paid for their data. All those people, like I said at the beginning, they're all creating content. They are creating the money for Facebook, and they're not getting paid for anything. It's like, imagine if Ford set up a motor factory. We went in, we all built the trucks, and then Ford went and sold trucks, didn't pay us for labor. And when we want to go buy a truck, Ford says, well, it's going to be $50,000. And you're like, but you didn't pay me. I don't have any money to buy it. Oh, well, that's too bad. That's what's happening, right? There's platforms out there now that are helping decentralize that as well, getting people paid for their data. One that I talk to a lot, it was called Big Token. And they help people by letting them create data on the platform and then reselling it out to people who want to use it for X, Y, or Z purposes. There are contracts in place that properly protect that data. It is very clear that when you get on the platform, your data is going to be sold, but you make money out of it. You're starting to see the residuals of your work come back to you. And I think as we see some of those things happen, as we see some of these platforms come to life, I do believe we'll see a different internet, and it will be a matter of market economics over time, just natural.
Yeah. I think a lot of this too, it's like shifting from users as the product to users as the customer, right? And that's historically not how it's worked, but that's what you all are doing. And I think eventually all that's going to be fed back into aggregate and really lift us all up. I want to pivot just a little bit and talk about size and getting to the niche part of this subtitle. A lot of what we're talking about also comes down to social media no longer being about reach and breadth, but to becoming about niches and depth. And I think Plant Life is a perfect example of that, in that you guys are focused on plant enthusiasts, right? But that said, it's still not a small number of people. I think there's some, 70% of millennials claim to be plant parents. So that's millions and millions of people, right? But can you talk us through, if I'm someone coming to Plant Life, maybe I love plants, how am I finding my niche within the platform itself and finding my own kind of sub-community in that larger plant group?
So 70% of millennials within the U.S. consider themselves to be plant parents. So that's over 50 million consumers, right? But not all of them are raising multiple plants, but that could be somebody raising their first plant. And so we're starting off our niche is starting with houseplants, but we know that for us to really kind of serve this consumer base, that it's really everything kind of rooted in houseplants. So it could be, rooted in plants, meaning there's a huge, and if you guys follow Live Kindly, there's a huge consumer base that's passionate about plant-based nutrition. There's also, how plants create wellness within decor. So decor is also an interest. There are various interests, from gardening to also craft. So when you download the Plant Life app, you can choose which, passions or things that you're interested in following. Our algorithm right now is set up we call it prime time, where because we're literally, just launching this, and we've actually kind of put our app on pause as we're working to look for a new developer that can help us kind of ensure that we are recalibrating and taking care of all of these privacy issues and this opportunity to really protect the consumer, that we don't go too far without getting all of this kind of lined up. And so we're actually looking at, is blockchain the right path forward? But to kind of answer your question, going back to that, is the goal is for you to be able to come on, choose those passions that you're interested in, and then based on things that you are following, that's what the content will start to serve it up. We've created Prime Time, which is our editorial piece, and the goal is that as you come on, we will serve up or highlight those stories that I mentioned before that we want to make sure either pull up thematically in terms of what is happening culturally, or that we are also kind of shining a spotlight on communities that we think, have an opportunity to grow within Plant Life as well. And that could be clubs, that could be, again, based on these different passions and topics. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's really smart as well, because you guys are built in a way that even as you scale up, it's always going to feel small. And that's really what everyone's after right now. It's why, we've seen Facebook lean so heavily into groups over the past couple of years, and why Instagram now has a close friends feature, and Twitter is now rolling out something called Flocks, which is the same kind of idea. So we're seeing all these bigger platforms try to kind of shrink themselves and create community in what feels like this massive slew of people. Right. But I think you'll keep that feeling even as you guys grow, which is great to see.
Well, ultimately, we want to connect people within our virtual space so that even hopefully this helps to drive connections in real life.
Right.
Because there are, if this helps to promote people's interest around it could be around a particular plant, like monsteras or cacti, right? And these cactuses club, they already exist out there. But how do we give them opportunity to connect on a bigger platform, and then even actually have a meetup post pandemic in real life? I know this is going to lean into a question you're going to ask us in the future, but around this kind of where do we hope social media goes? Personally, I hope that social media will help connect individuals in the physical world more so than just in the meta world. And I say that as a parent, having raised 2 children in this digital age, and their lives are in the meta space, already. To even talk about the meta getting larger, that's their life already. I'm trying to figure out, how do I, create a place that actually promotes people to connect with nature, connect with themselves, as groups. Those are the things that are kind of driving us.
Yeah. I love that. And it's also kind of the antithesis of what we've seen the big platforms, right, which are designed to keep you on the platforms online as much as possible.
Yeah, we had let Lana, she's our plant muse. She's like, what are you talking? But I mean, her job, she has the best job in the world. She actually goes out and designs landscapes and works with, tech companies in the area to how do they bring plants and kind of create green space within your home or green space within your corporate setting. I mean, to me, that's the best job. But how do we leverage Plant Life to enable individuals to go out and connect with nature or bring plants into their life? Because we know statistically that we as individuals, this notion I mentioned before, biophilia, is a real thing. It's been studied that we have a tendency as humans to want to be connected to or nurture something that's living. And if you take that away and we're locked into this virtual space, it's not healthy. So that's one of the reasons why people are leaning into growing more plants or connecting. So if we can promote that, we feel like we're ultimately doing our job.
Right. Yeah. And in talking about, how the bigger platforms are trying to shrink themselves, I think that also brings us to another important reality to call out, which is that obviously the Facebooks and Twitters and Instagrams of the world are paying very close attention to how the tide of social media is changing. And we've seen this very clear pattern over the years where big tech is going to acquire any and every company that challenges, right? I think Zuckerberg has acquired some 95 plus companies to date. So we're seeing this now in part be addressed through antitrust lawsuits. But I'm curious, Joe, from your perspective, what kind of institutional change might be required to bring that pattern to a halt and that we would actually see longer term solutions beyond antitrust?
Yeah, so I've actually advised some of the attorneys general in the antitrust cases. And all due respect, I don't think it's going to make a ton of change. I think we need other changes from a business perspective. We do need some structural change in regards to some guardrails on the internet. We need basic privacy rights. We need basic data rights. I think there are other things that can be put in place to just put some guardrails, but I don't think there's any way to properly regulate the internet, to be honest with you. I think it's like trying to put a box around water. Whatever gets put into place, some inventor will figure out a way to get around it or to create a new technical architecture that doesn't comply. It doesn't have to comply with the law, right? There's so many ways around it. So I think the bigger thing is trying to make a better business argument. And that's the big thing that we're trying to do at Beacon with privacy, right? There's so many arguments to making privacy part of your business model. I mean, think of many of you probably at a fundamental level use data for marketing purposes. If you respect people's privacy, it's proven you will get more accurate and deeper access to data. Well, that means actually you're not going to spend as much on your marketing spend because what you have is more accurate. It's going to the people you want it to rather than just everyone you can collect on. Mm-hmm. From an infrastructural perspective, you have to consider that all the data that you're collecting, you want all these mass swaths of data, these data lakes that you're creating. Well, that costs server space. If you have more efficiency in your operations and you don't have as much data, you don't have to purchase as much server space. You don't have as much storage space, right? Consider also internally from your operations, you have data scientists who are academics, PhDs often, that you're paying a low labor rate to just go and look through a spreadsheet and hygiene the data, to get rid of the duplicates, to clean up the mess. That's not what they went to school for, to go just pick through an Excel spreadsheet. They're not enjoying their job, and you're paying for something that they're not even specialized in. You're paying a high rate for this. So if you have more clean data, it's also an efficiency in your operations because you don't have to pay so much in all this work, right?
It's better for the environment.
Better for the environment. You're not burning so much energy to maintain it all. Like there's so many points. And this is why I got into privacy. I believe there's a fundamental better business practice. I believe companies that begin to respect privacy will be able to pivot into new areas faster, operate their business practices better, more efficient, communicate between team members faster. They'll have it documented better so everyone can exchange and pass out the torch. And that's what we work on. That's what I think is going to help change the internet. Regulations need to be put into place to get some guardrails to protect us at a base level. But even if I give rights, we give rights to everybody in this room, you people may understand it because you're more technical, but you're talking about the mass population. Mm-hmm. We can barely get on board about what's truth or not. Okay? Like data rights matter, but we need to raise awareness. We need to train. We need to be more data literate first. And that's why we're working so hard to make this a business case, because I think it's faster to change business than it is to change regulation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pile on to this. So at Lips, we actually allow you to be private until you opt in to be in our ecosystem. So we kind of think of data as private initially, just because of the nature of sometimes people don't want to reveal, their LGBTQ or BIPOC, they don't want to reveal themselves. And we said, well, look, how can we create this safe, protected space so people can feel free to share their content and still have their ownership without necessarily revealing themselves. And so that's what one of our patents is on. And that's kind of a proof of authorship, which is you can be private until you opt in to be in public. That's a way to have data protection without having, us completely scraping.
No. I'm saying I have no idea why the internet was built to be public by default. Crazy. How do we opt into that?
Yeah, I don't know. But, so Lips really thinks about all of its kind of interactions as opting into something, mm-hmm. as opposed to opting out of something, which is the natural thing. Everything's public, and then you have to opt out, and then you have to opt out of everything.
Right.
You're opted out in life, right?
Yeah.
And then back to your, you mentioned something about purchasing. Mm-hmm. So Lips, I don't believe this will ever happen, but if Facebook ever came and knocking, I'll let Andy decide. But as far as I know, we would never be
Never be
purchased by Facebook or any of these platforms. So we would always be kind of a niche platform.
Love it.
I believe that.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And a lot of this is a very realistic conversation, which I think is great. But I think another important reality to call out is, of course, money and funding in the space and how the VC world is currently working. And right now, as it stands, a lot of VC funding is largely based on growth, right? And like which platforms get to 100 million users fastest, those are the ones that get the most money. So at the core, I think in a lot of ways, that's kind of inherently motivating businesses to chase the wrong goal. And it's certainly not what either of your guys' three businesses are motivated to reach. But Barbara, I'm curious, as a VC yourself, in this utopian social media, what might be better metrics by which to evaluate social media platforms beyond growth when it comes to how to dole out funding?
Well, I mean, there are some softer metrics I know that Lips is looking at, like, for example, your image. So I have a son, and he's a millennial, I'll put it that way. And he says, Mom, I look at Instagram, and it's depressing for me because I see all these pictures of these people in their point in time shots, and it's like very distressing to him. And so Lips is trying to combat some of that, right? If you're looking through a Lips line, how do you measure that? How do you measure that someone's really not depressed looking at your feed? That could be, create anxiety. So we're looking at some emotional metrics. We're looking at some body image metrics, like do I feel better about myself because I've been looking at Lips? Are my interactions more positive inside of the Lips ecosystem? Things of that nature. It's kind of some of the things we're looking at. Clearly, as a venture capitalist and as an investor, you're looking at your traditional blocking and tackling. But because Lips is such a niche, or Plant Life is such a niche network, it's almost like, I would say, like text messaging, right? You have that super targeted, high-end information from those types of people. And I think though that will be more valuable in the long run as an investor versus kind of the traditional Twitters and Facebooks that we have now.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say for Plant Life, like our ad, there is an ad opportunity, but we're looking at it from a value add in terms of editorial. But we've kind of got a three-prong business model, whereas the social is one component, but the marketplace is another. And then we are creating a smart tech device that will enable plants to grow better within this community, just as people are growing.
Love that. Yeah, last question here. I think we can't talk about the future of social media without talking about the future of ads on social media, given it's such a huge part of the revenue model. Do you guys think that there is room for ads in the future of social media? And if so, how might they look different than the kind of ads that we see now?
Well, I just play off. Like, I feel, again, that it needs to be value add versus just ads for ads sake. And if we're looking at it, like, there is traditional editorial that does, it's curated to add value to the community. And so it has to kind of go through those filters. And so that means, like, who are we really partnering with? How do we work with them to bring additional value other than just getting their message connected to the consumers? So that's what we're looking at.
Currently, Lips has no ad revenue model. We're looking more at like a community model, more around kind of like I don't want to say Gab, but Gab or BitChute. If you look at some of these kind of other alternative platforms, they're like, hey, donate for our server space, donate for our phone bank. So we will have that, and we will have some membership. So we're not doing an ads, it's like a traditional run an ad, or here's a fake sponsored post that kind of looks like an ad, but it kind of looks like a piece of the platform.
Like transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're looking at that either. So we're not doing ads in the traditional way of doing that.
I think for me, as much as I've spoken out against the industry, I think ads are okay to an extent. I think the bigger problem is that on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, the lion's share of their revenue is from advertisement. I think that's the real problem. We've had advertisements in media forever. Newspapers had ads, but you could clearly denote what was ad and what was not. I think the biggest problem, and maybe this is some guardrails too for policy, is I think ads need to be very distinct, right? Ever since the early 2010s, we started to have native or in-stream advertisements. You can barely tell what is an ad and what's not. If you look at the history of Google, I actually made a full visual history of all Google ads in my book. There's a page dedicated to it. And it's meant to look like a search result, right? If you actually look at the history of where it started, where it was a full color box, to where now it's just this little tiny thing that's tagged on the side of the link that is for the ad, you can barely tell what's an ad and what's not. And that's part of their business model, right? That's their business model, is to get you to click. I think if you considered a world where maybe Facebook's revenue was 10 to 20% of advertisements rather than 90 or 100, right? You get a different product. Facebook, Plant Life, Lips, anyone could have ads that subsidize their business and make sure they have some base money to keep the lights on.
Or even reciprocal. Like most of the things that we're doing right now, basically, because we're a startup, it's all reciprocal. Like we're working with, we've worked with Plant Proper. They're a startup, kind of their grower out of Florida. So we created some programs, some giveaways that benefited both consumer bases. We're fans of Black in the Garden. It's a podcast by a woman who is really kind of like percolating up these great stories of BIPOC community getting back into the garden and small businesses that are resulting from that. And so we are creating some reciprocal programs that just help to connect our communities. Plant Black out of LA is another one. And then also we're creating some care, kind of plant care through some plant influencers. And it's, again, it's just all reciprocal because again, we're all trying to kind of grow this together.
Yeah. But yeah, I think fundamentally the bigger problem is it's their pure revenue model,
Right.
You guys have a model where you're building for the people using your platform. It's different. If 10 or 20% was from ads on Facebook and 40, 60% was from the people, they're going to build a product for the people. Right now, we're talking about, you mentioned, I think earlier, Skyler, if you need help on the platform, who do you call, right? The customer versus the user, right? Everyone says, I am the customer because I'm using the platform. Well, I ask you all, who do you call if you need customer service? There's no number because you're not the customer. That's why. We are the product. And if you create something where advertisement is not the model, you become the customer. You're a paying customer. You are the customer.
Yeah, I think it's all great. I'll wrap us up here. I know we have a few minutes and we'll leave some time for Q&A so you guys can think on your questions. But I think what I love about everything we've talked about today is that we keep using the word niche to describe these platforms and these solutions. And in a way, they are niche in that they haven't yet become mainstream, right? And you are in the minority by practicing these things. But really, when you get down to it, what we're talking about is privacy and connection and inclusion. And all of these things are not niche at all. And I think they have the power to build a better internet for all of us as a whole, which is certainly inspiring and gives us a lot to be hopeful about. So I think we'll end on that note. Unless you want to add, jump in.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just going to say, it's like, again, I think we have to build it together.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's, we're creating a space, but we're not, we need the community to drive it. And that's what I was saying is the community needs to be the owners of this.
Right. Yeah. All right. If there's any questions, we will take them now. I think it's just, you got to brave the microphone and do it. No, you can yell at us though.
It's a small intimate group.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the conversation. Really, really interesting to listen into. I have a quick question. Is this on now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
cool.
there you go.
For Leslie and Barbara, you guys talked a lot about throttling and getting, deplatformed. When do you think we should put the responsibility on the company or the influencer that has been quote unquote throttled or deplatformed versus the platform itself? So when, if there's an influencer posting quote, sexual content, when should the platform be able to go in and say, hey, you can't use our platform anymore? So on and so forth. I've done a lot of social media content marketing, and in my experience, it's Usually it's just the content that is the best performs best. So I've been a little adverse to believing in like throttled posts where the platform deliberately says, hey, we're not going to show this as often, unless there is something in the content that goes against TOS or only should be shown to specific audiences.
So I'll quickly answer, just say, yeah, it's probably the one thing that, keeps us up at night is like, as we grow, how you also like, how do you maintain that? We're so small at this point that the community can self-report. So there's a report tool and then that gets circled up. We haven't had a committee that's elected, right? But we do have like a group of 6 that kind of then review the content. And it's this idea of seek to understand. So we're seeking to understand from the individuals, like, why did they post it? Or, try to encourage them to have a conversation about, it first. And then if we find like that the group realizes that this is harmful or not appropriate, then we will talk to the individual. And then if we have to remove the content, we will, or deplatform. But it's a seek to understand model for us at this point.
Okay, so if some of these bots, which everybody knows there's bots on Twitter, bots on Facebook, and they're bots, okay, came in, attacked you, and you had no idea that it was non-people, and you were harassed online multiple times, and then you were reported multiple times by these bots, then were you really fairly deplatformed because you just posted a tweet or something? Maybe some words, and they've been scanning for these words. So, clearly there is content that shouldn't be on the internet. However, there's a lot of content on the internet, and it's kind of subjective, right? There's some war photos coming out. Do I really want to see that? No, but it's kind of reality. It's happening. Things are coming out. Should that be deplatformed? Maybe, maybe not. Some of it's very graphic. Maybe there need to be other kind of ratings. One of the things we did in the mobile space early was we had a lot of conversations about, should something be rated G, PG? Are we going to take the same kind of rating monikers as television or as movies? Are we going to make it as strict as that? There's no, if you say, well, hey, your terms of service got violated, but what does that really mean? And it's not done consistently. It's okay if you do it consistently, like, okay, all this type of content got off, okay, fair. But it's not really done consistently either. That's not the problem.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the really interesting talk. A ton of interesting things in there. One piece that really caught my attention was you mentioned in LIPS there's this opt-in process to sort of be anonymous, if I understand it correctly, and then opt-in to be public. And I'd be interested just to hear more about that, because it does sound like a really interesting approach to foster inclusivity, and then also how that will work in the context of bad actors with inauthentic accounts who might want to abuse that kind of functionality.
So LIPS will have no bots, so you won't have an inauthentic account. And then we're also blockchain based. So if you do create an account there, we're going to be able to know, and your content's going to be revealed to us at minimum. We're going to have a record of all your content. And so the fact that you're going to have a key and it's just going to be a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, X, Y, Z, and C, as you normally would see on an encryption key, you're anonymous as far as it's not Barbara posting, so you don't know it's necessarily me. But we are kind of tracking what you're posting, so we're not being 100% naive. It's very hard to have bad actors when the bad actors have to make an account. The bad actors normally don't want to make accounts. Back to the bot issue. When you have all these bots, you're not going to have the ability to make a bot in LIPS. That's not a thing. They're not going to be able for somebody to go and make these bots, and then they can create thousands of accounts at once, hundreds of thousands of accounts at once, and then kind of do the bad actor. But they're bad actors in everything. So this is why we have our community moderation model And then we have our AI moderation model. There's also some things you're not going to be able to do in libs, like we don't have the concept of like. We don't really have the concept of share. So there are some things you're not going to be able to do because we found that those things are harmful.
Thank you. It does. I think an exclusive focus on bad actors creating bots is possibly missing a lot of bad activities that we see on like Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere. But I appreciate it.
Give me an example of what you believe is a bad actor.
So back in 2014, for example, in your slippage showing, there were a lot of people who were not bots, but inauthentic actors creating accounts purporting to be Black women, just causing, just throwing bombs, saying, promoting hashtags like End Father's Day with the goal of just promoting racial chaos, that's been happening ever since.
Created, right? I mean, part of why this is created is because of what you said exactly. And we're not allowing those kind of actors into our system.
Yeah, that's right.
We're trying not to, right? I mean, bad actors are going to surface, right? It happens. But we're trying to create the safest space that we can, and that's why we have the moderation, kind of the governance board that we have from this community.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Oh.
Uh-oh. Not allowed.
Yes, I'm allowed. Thank you so much, all of you guys. How can we connect with all your different entities, platforms? Ooh, give the plug. Give the plug. That's the plug.
If you want to go on Lips, look us up, lips.social, LIPSS.SONCIAM, social. That's how you
Ours is Get Plant Life. GetPlantLife.com.
Lips.social.
And your book.
Yeah, our website,
We're not an app store. You can go online, on website.
web-based. Our work, if you're trying to learn more about privacy, how you can operationalize it, what value it brings to your company, you can go to beacontrustnetwork.com. Just as a matter of who we are, we don't have social media, but other than LinkedIn. So you can find us on LinkedIn, Better Ethics and Consumer Outcomes Network, beacontrustnetwork.com. Not on Twitter, not on Facebook, or anywhere else. Yeah, I have a book called Automating Humanity, if you want to read it. Helped influence the visuals for the social dilemma. So it's in classrooms all across the United States, teaching kids right now. So very excited about the impact it's made. And yeah, would love to talk more afterwards if you're interested.
While we're plugging things, you guys see these little QR codes on your seats with some scary existential questions. We at Backslash created a digital experiment that asks you to reevaluate your own relationship with technology. So feel free to give it a scan, share it with your friends. But that wraps up our session for today. So thank you so much to Barbara, Leslie, and Joe, and thank you to all of you guys for joining.